Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai
Jai
Guru.
Guru.
And welcome to another episode of Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line. We are on chapter 20 still, on part 3. And it's a good day because Priyank is back. So we've got all 4 of us back together. So welcome. And before we go on to this section of the chapter, I thought it might be quite nice to remind ourselves what happened last week and also share with Priyank what we talked about too. So, Mike, what happened last week?
Quite a bit. We went from Mukunda being very motivated to go to Kashmir, having plans in his head, motivating his friends, and then trying to find a servant to go to Kashmir, to, after a few negative responses from people that he was sure would be on board, starting to think about the idea and starting to think about whether he is defying the wishes of his guru. And he came to that conclusion, and now he says he doesn't want to go to Kashmir unless his guru is coming along. And then his guru said, "Why don't you stay for dinner?" And that's kind of where we left off.
And now we get to find out why Sri Yukteswar was so adamant that he didn't want Mukunda to go. So Mukunda becomes very ill. So he gets up from his seat from having dinner, and suddenly he's feeling really nauseous, and he's got this, he says, ghastly churning sensation in his stomach. And he said that the pain was so intense that he felt like he'd just been put into hell, which is quite like a strong description. So you can imagine how, forceful and awful it must have been. And then he describes how he gropes blindly towards his guru.
Yeah, this is a really, really vivid description, isn't it? It puts you right in Mukunda's person as he's kind of experiencing to it. So it's vivid because he's saying that he's blind. He's almost, the pain is so intense that he's blind. He can't see. He doesn't know where he is, but he is going towards his guru, which is really quite something. He's not forgetting where he is or who he's with. He's putting his faith in his guru, as he is going to say it in a little bit, in a few sentences. But I imagine like this kind of thing happens when it's like a near-death experience, and where like if your pain is so intense that your vision goes, your hearing goes, and then your body probably like momentarily makes you forget about all those sensations, so you can go into the light or like be peaceful, I suppose, because if it's that painful, then your body's probably got certain methods to like stop you from just having a heart attack because of the pain. Just because I imagine a lot of people go through this when they have a painful death or near the end of their life.
And the timing is interesting, isn't it? It's not, I don't think Sri Yukteswar caused any of it, but maybe he has the power to, there must have been some karma of some sort, and he had the power to trigger it when he found it at the right moment.
Yeah. Or he knew when it was going to come precisely in the day and thought, well, I need to hold him here until that point. Yeah, it just sounds awful. And then Mukunda collapses, and he said that he had all the symptoms of the Asiatic cholera, which is what his mum had, wasn't it? And what she died of. It must have been quite a frightening experience, because it just kind of came out of nowhere, and that it was so strong. Yeah, Mike.
Wasn't that also what he had as a young boy? And then he was healed because he bowed to Lahiri Mahashaya's picture, right?
Oh yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, true. Yeah, he said he wasn't it in his mind because he was so ill. He just had to picture Lahiri Mahashaya. Wow. Yeah.
His mum said, took him to the picture and said, repeat his name again and again.
Yeah. Wow. Good remembering, Mike. Yeah. So then Sri Yukteswar and Kanai carries Mukunda into the sitting room, and Mukunda's crying in agony, and he says, "Master, I surrender my life to you." And I think that's such an important line. In that moment, all he can think of is that deep surrender to his guru. What do you think, Priyank?
Yeah, it's quite a line, as you say, and it's quite amazing that he can come up with that response at such an intense period of like painful, excruciating pain. But he's coming out with some very profound words to kind of live by, and to surrendering to the guru is like the highest, ultimate kind of goal. And it's easy to like say that we surrender to the guru. Our life is for the guru. But how many of us would go through this specific thing and remember that this is what we've kind of signed up to or lived by? Because it's easy to say, but to do it is obviously tougher to walk the walk.
I was just thinking exactly the same thing. I say this line sometimes when minor things go wrong, right? And then I'm dramatic and I'm like, oh, Guruji, my life is in shambles. Help me. I surrender to you. But if it actually it felt like it actually coming to a close here. So having that strong faith in that moment is really powerful.
I was thinking something similar too. I thought, how amazing would it be if we all had this intensity of surrender, even when we felt well or when things were going well. And maybe that's the point, we learn how to surrender to the guru in that way, no matter what our circumstances are. But it made me think a lot about the guru-disciple relationship and how, we can surrender to the guru in different ways. And I found some different readings from Guruji, which I thought would be quite helpful to read out. So Mike, would you be able to please read the first one?
Absolutely. There is complete surrender. There is no compulsion when a disciple accepts the guru's training. I can think of no relationship in this world greater than that which I had with my master. The guru-disciple relationship is love in its supreme form.
The guru-disciple relationship is the highest expression of friendship, for it is based on unconditional divine love and wisdom. It is the loftiest and most sacred of all relationships. Christ and his disciples were all one in spirit, as are my master, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and I, and those who are in tune with me, because of the common bond of God's divine love. One who partakes of this relationship is on the way to wisdom and freedom.
To regain one's divinity, one must have such a master or guru. He who faithfully follows a true guru becomes like him, for the guru helps to elevate the disciple to his own level of realization.
Thank you all. We're very blessed, I feel, to have a guru. Many people don't have one, and we do. We have Guruji and the line of Param Gurus, and we're very, very blessed. And I really loved in that last reading that line that says, "He who faithfully follows a true guru becomes like him." For the guru helps to elevate the disciple to his own level of realization. It's quite something, isn't it? It's not something to take lightly. So that's the kind of relationship that Sri Yukteswar and Mukunda had. And yeah, we were in this moment where Mukunda's just saying, "I surrender my life to you," and he believes that it's fast going away from the shores of his body. But fear not, because all will be well, because he is protected. And we have a really sweet, tender moment where Sri Yukteswar puts Mukunda's head on his lap and he strokes his forehead, and Guruji describes it as an angelic tenderness that comes from Sri Yukteswar, which is so sweet, so motherly. It's very divine mother, isn't it?
Yeah, like that chant, devotee knows how sweet you are. And
Yeah.
this kind of, if you're blessed enough to have an experience such as this, you should journal it at all costs. Like, stop what you're doing, because you'd be a fool not to come back to it and in your later moments of your life when things are not so sweet.
Yeah. And also, it's a really nice example of the balance that Sri Yukteswar has, because he often came across as quite Heavenly Father-esque, disciplinarian and those qualities, but also we see the other side, the Divine Mother, and how he can be both, all at once and go from one to the other. And it's a nice example for us to follow too.
Yeah, and like someone else who wasn't Sri Yukteswar maybe would have said, "Oh no, it might be cholera and it's contagious," and wants to go away from Mukunda, but he's the complete opposite. And that's kind of why people seek refuge in God, right? Because he's the one who is always there for you and not just when it suits them.
And then your guru being a reflection of God and being sent from God is the same, right? They never turn away from us, ever, even in our darkest hour. And then Sri Yukteswar says, you see now what would have happened if you were at the station with your friends. I had to look after you in this strange way because you chose to doubt my judgment about taking the trip at this particular time. And I can just imagine him saying it in a very soft tone. It feels very motherly. It doesn't feel like he's chiding him in any way, or at least that's just how I'm interpreting it. But it feels very much full of love and tenderness and sweetness.
The inverse of "I told you so," kind of
Yeah,
passive aggressive kind of
yeah.
thing that people do, especially when there's some rivalry or one-upsmanships and in relationships, which of course there isn't between a guru and disciple. But it's really important, this point, because even though you may turn your back on the guru in some way, even if small or large, he will never do likewise, because that relationship is unconditional, right? And so essentially no sin is so great that Guruji will leave you or God will leave you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so true. And also, when things aren't going our way or we don't understand why a particular thing isn't happening, often we're just being protected by God and gurus, and maybe we don't realize it yet. But we will understand at some point, and Mukunda understands in this moment. He says, "I understood at last." So, it's those little moments of realization, isn't it? When we have that moment of understanding about why Guruji's taught a particular thing or the meaning behind something, and I suppose he's had that now. And he said that, great masters don't really display their powers openly. And anybody who was just casually observing the day's events would have thought that they were just, natural and normal and, nothing out of the ordinary. But Sri Yukteswar was very clever because he worked in such a subtle way that no one could have really detected it. And he had inconspicuously worked his will through Bahari and my uncle and Rajendra and the others. Probably everyone but me had thought the situations logical and normal.
Isn't that somehow when we journal back events that happened and we feel like, oh wow, in the end I've come full circle, that you sometimes feel like probably the guru moved like levers here and there a little bit to make things happen the way they did. And I feel like this is an example of that.
True. I love this line that he says, probably everyone but me had thought the situation logical and normal, which means that, like, when we're being used by God and gurus and we think we're following our logic by doing something, that's the correct quote, correct thing to do. It could be God instilling that thought to us. and just for an ultimate purpose, for some other means, whether it's a brother or sister disciple or the larger divine schema, depending on what the situation is, of course. But this is different to how Babaji did this for Lahiri Mahashaya. If you remember, he put the thought in his superintendent's head that, oh, move your accountant to the office in Ranikhet, it'll be good there. But that wasn't logical, and it was like almost like a hypnosis almost Babaji was doing, and like it wasn't. And then when that superintendent came to his senses, he's like, why did I put him there? That wasn't the right thing. Shouldn't we moved him back? Obviously Lahiri Mahashaya was there because Babaji and God and Gurus wanted him to be there. But this is different from how Sri Yukteswar has kind of influenced things here, because they followed their logic and they did the right thing, whereas that wasn't the case in the other. So it's good that it's interesting to compare.
Be so in tune that when it's your guru at work and when it's not. And if it just seems like Mukunda had that attunement with Sri Yukteswar, where he could recognize, even in its subtlety, that it was Sri Yukteswar's hand and not just a logical response from his uncle or his friend. And there's actually a lovely web page from SRF, and they've got this series of videos in there about understanding what the guru is and how to attune ourselves with the guru, and it's really helpful. There's lots of different talks on there, and lots of knowledge and opportunities for understanding. So we're going to pop that in the video description for those people who are watching on YouTube, and obviously if you're listening on any other, I don't know, Spotify or anything like that, you can just go to the YouTube and have a look. It's really helpful. And I never knew that SRF did those kind of blog post type pages where they put together certain topics and videos, but yeah, it's very nice. Okay, so Mukunda's become ill and we don't know what's going to happen, except that we know he's in good hands. So it says here that Sri Yukteswar, he never failed to observe his social obligations. He's obviously very practical minded as well. And it made me think, well, yeah, neither should we. We should also observe our social obligations, even if we know otherwise. What do you think, Priyank?
Reminded me of the popular line in our teachings: live in this world, but don't be of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what Sri Yukteswar was doing, isn't he? And so he instructs Kanai to get the physician and to notify Mukunda's uncle. And, Mukunda's protesting. He's saying, Master, only you can heal me. I'm too far gone for any doctor. He's got this real complete faith in his guru, doesn't he?
It also makes sense because the Asiatic cholera wasn't very curable back then. So I think Sri Yukteswar was really the only person who could probably heal him. Like Lahiri Mahashaya was the only person who could have healed him as a boy, I think.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't actually know that. So yeah, that makes sense now why he would say that. And Sri Yukteswar comforts him and he says, "Child, you are protected by the divine mercy." And this line really stood out to me because it made me think how we are also protected by the divine mercy, by God. And Sri Yukteswar also, he always gives credit to the divine when he does any healing, doesn't he? He never says, "I will heal you." He always gives the credit back to God, which is obviously a true hallmark of a great master.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. The humility is so observable in this transaction between the two, where he is a realized master. He could be wherever he wants to be, but he's there, nurturing, taking care of, showing kindness, giving this love, unconditional love to Mukunda. And we're all, having the ripple effect of that moment through this book. It's just such an instructive moment, but one of humility by Sri Yukteswar.
Yeah, absolutely. And it made me think about our own lives and how can we have these moments of healing when we need it? How can we rely on that divine protection and mercy? And then I thought about, we've got the Scientific Healing Affirmations book by Paramahansa Yogananda. And, that's really helpful. There's so much in there. And on page 37, there's also the method that you can use to practice your affirmations and, rely on God's healing power. And I was also reading some things that Guruji had said about this, and I thought it might be quite helpful. So, Mike, would you mind starting us off, please?
Yeah. Whether you are in the African jungle or at war or racked by disease and poverty, just say to the Lord and believe, I am in the armored car of your presence, moving across the battlefield of life. I am protected. There is no other way to be safe. Use common sense and trust fully in God. I am not suggesting something eccentric. I am urging you to affirm and believe, no matter what happens, in this truth. Lord, it is you alone who can help me.
Draw on God for the solution of all your problems. Do not allow your courage and quick wit to be paralyzed when overwhelming difficulties suddenly come down on you like an avalanche. Keep awake your intuitive common sense and your faith in God, and try to find even the slenderest means of escape. And you will find that means, and all will come out right in the end, for God has hidden his goodness behind the superficiality of the paradoxes of mortal experiences.
In times of darkness, hold to the loving guidance of God. Make the Lord the shepherd of your soul. Make him your searchlight when you move along a shadowy pathway in life. He is your moon in the night of ignorance. He is your sun during the wakeful hours, and he is your pole star on the dark seas of mortal existence. Seek his guidance. The world will go on like this in its ups and downs. Where shall we look for a sense of direction? Not to the prejudices roused within us by our habits and the environmental influences of our families, our country, or the world, but to the guiding voice of truth within.
Beautifully read. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, hopefully that helps someone who needed to hear it. And it's also really good to be reminded as well. So Sri Yukteswar has reminded Mukunda that he is protected by God. And he says, don't worry about the doctor. And he won't find you in the state that you're currently in. You are already healed, Sri Yukteswar said.
I feel like this kind of structured, kind of step-by-step things that happen before a divine healing takes place in this book is pertinent. It feels like it's not just that, like, it's dramatic in the sense that there's a build-up and anticipation, but it feels like each point is relevant. It leads to the next point, which leads to the divine healing. It's not like just, like sometimes, especially in the Bible, there's like, you're healed. Like there's no like scientific explanation as to what happened that caused and made the healing happen. This provides us like this, for example, there's 3 points here. Child, firstly, that you're protected by the divine mercy. Then he says, don't worry about the doctor. That's not going to happen. He's not going to find you in this state. You're already healed. So there's like three like kind of steps there or proceedings, and it feels like they're kind of all required. Like for the eligibility of a divine healing to take place, you have to be at one with God. So Mukunda is protected by the divine mercy. He has to have complete faith right? So you can't worry and rely on a doctor or an outward kind of, medicinal thing, because if you're going to get divinely healed, then all of that is kind of irrelevant. And then it's already happened. When those two things are there, it's, the healing is already there. And it says, as he says, you're already healed, which is the last point. And obviously we know Sri Yukteswar has healed him in the past as well in a similar kind of vein.
Yeah, really, I was going to say something similar, but you said it so much better, Frank. So thanks, thanks for that. I was going to highlight just the channels, essentially the channel of Guruji, of Yogananda, young Mukunda here, having the faith had to be open. We had that before, where he had to pray to Lahiri Mahashaya. He had to really believe it. And then the other channel of Sri Yukteswar, he was the channel for the divine mercy coming through him. So both had to be open in order for this miracle to happen. So yeah, well said, Priyak.
Thanks. Guruji's preparation for this episode helped me, I think. But I remember the previous healing that I was thinking of. Sri Yukteswar says, he kind of challenges Mukunda. He says, you say you have pain, I say you have none. How can the contradiction exist? I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember the exact
You
line.
have said it nearly word for word. Just how can such contradictions exist? Yeah, well done.
You found it. Which chapter, or where was it?
It's in chapter 12.
Okay, right. Yeah, so even that, it kind of really pushed Mukunda to break his kind of boundaries and limitations of his belief and reliance on kind of other things than his guru's divine hand, right? And this is similar here, right? So it's kind of like, when you're taught something, it's not just one, you just have to read it once to get it. You've got to do it again and again and again, and then you kind of make it a habit, and then it kind of enters your subconscious and superconscious, then you realize it. So I feel like this is kind of what's happening.
Yeah, just slight side thing here. So after I got Kriya, that you can then have the additional supplement lessons, and there are lots of them. And I thought, no, I'm going to go back and I'm going to revisit all the basic lessons again. And it's been so helpful, just to keep, like you say, you can't just read it a couple of times and be done with it. There's so much in there. And I found that, going back again now with the where I am in my life now, and the understanding that I have and the connection that I have now, it's changed my experience of how I've navigated the lessons, and I'm sure it will continue to do so as I get older. But yeah, there's so much in those lessons, even just the basic ones.
Yeah, when you said basic, I thought it can't possibly be called basic, because there's nothing basic about those basic lessons. But I just checked the app, and they are actually called basic lessons.
Yes, that's
right. What a misnomer, eh?
She must have thought I was being really rude. How can you call them that?
SRF calling them basic.
I guess it's because it's like the foundational lessons, right?
Yeah. I think as our youthful interpretation of the word basic, I remember I said to someone, Reva or someone at the center, I was complimenting her on her. Oh no, it was not on the podcast. I said something about the basic interpretation of what she was reading. Hers was obviously right, and I was interpreting some outlandish way of doing it, some complex way. But she took a basic to mean, oh, in a kind of derogatory way. But that's not exactly what it is. Like in youth nowadays, we think of basic as kind of like a derogatory thing, isn't it? But it's not really. That's not really the true definition.
Yeah, I remember that. She must have thought, excuse me?
Live on air. Wow, what a part.
But no, it's a good reminder that there is a lot of positive connotations in the word basic. So, anywho, back to the story. So, as soon as Sri Yukteswar says what he says to Mukunda, he says, with my guru's words, the excruciating suffering left me. And yeah, it's the exact same, isn't it, as in chapter 12. And he says that a doctor arrived very soon, and he examined him really carefully, and he says that, you've gone through the worst, and he's still going to take some specimens and he's going to test them in the lab and see what comes back. And the next day, it says the physician arrived hurriedly. I find this an interesting description. He's sort of, I can imagine him sort of like running
Briefcase,
in,
stethoscope flying around.
puffing and puffing because he's just realised this amazing thing. And Mukunda's sitting up, he's in good spirits, and the doctor says, well, you're smiling and you're chatting, and it's as if you didn't have any kind of close call with death. And he pats Mukunda's hand very gently, and he says that he didn't expect to find him alive. And when he tested the specimens, it was Asiatic cholera. And then what he says is interesting to me, particularly, I think, as a Westerner. He says, "You are fortunate, young man, to have a guru with divine healing powers. I am convinced of it." And I thought, wow, like, when do you ever hear, in the West at least, a doctor, nodding to, okay, well, it's the divine healing powers and not me, or not sort of science, quote unquote. Yeah, Mike, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's another testament that how miraculous it was. And I think sometimes gurus, or saints, they do miracles for just one person, but I think this one was one also for the doctor. So he could see the divine healing power. Maybe it was a change for his life as well.
Yeah, good pick up there, Lauren, about how often do you see a Western doctor saying words such as this? But they must be out there. There must obviously be doctors of serious faith, and them realizing that what they can and can't do is quite limited compared to what God and gurus can do. But I'll put it to you in this section. Why do you think, each of you can answer hopefully a different way, why do you think the doctor doesn't become an instant disciple after seeing a case such as this, which he obviously hasn't seen, and he's obviously convinced that Sri Yukteswar has healed him based on those samples? Why wouldn't he become an instant disciple there and then? I know we don't know if he did, but let's assume he didn't. Why would he not, do you think?
I feel like I can't answer this because, one, this is my moment of coming clean. So the reason I thought about, as a Westerner, is because of your comment, Priyank, on the card about this. Yeah, that wouldn't happen in the West. So it wasn't my own individual thought. It came from you. But I think what you said is probably true.
Reading my cheat notes, this is not good.
I know. Well, they're there.
I need to write it in Gujarati next time, I think.
Yeah.
My first thought is that by saying this, evidently he's not in the West, because we don't often have gurus. It's not much of a common thing in the West. So he may be exposed to that world more than us, and he may actually have a guru himself. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. He's actually on a path himself.
I don't know if one miracle is sometimes enough to convince someone to start searching God, but we don't know, as you said, we don't know Priyank. Maybe this was the one thing that tipped him over the edge, and that was a blessing for him. I feel like that no miracle goes wasted. I think they all have a purpose.
I like what you said, Chris, about the doctor and what his spiritual path may be. And my take on this question, when I thought about it, is that these stories are really common in India, like really common, and even to this present day, like in my family, my nephew in Gujarat, he was just going for his really important exams at the age of 16, like before going to university, and so the exams were really important for him to get into university, and and he'd worked really hard, and then in the last 3 weeks he couldn't even sit. Like, he was in such intense pain in his stomach. We don't know what it was, and he barely could sit. The doctors didn't know what to do, and so he couldn't sit for the exam because he was in such intense pain and he couldn't concentrate. But then he went to see his guru, and he just went to see him. Like, it was a small intimate gathering, and they didn't he didn't tell, no one told the guru what the situation was. It was just for darshan. And the guru looked at him, my nephew, and his pain just there and then just vanished, like literally vanished. And then obviously they told him what happened, and he kind of knew. And then obviously the grace, kind of the whole situation was quite sacred to everyone involved. And then there's my cousin's got a picture of that whole scene of that meeting. And I thought nothing much of it, and then I got told about this whole thing that happened, and then I was like, wow, what a fantastic picture it is, because all you see in the picture is, like, you know, an ochre-clad Swami and my nephew next to him, and my cousin just facing him. So you don't think much of it, you know. We're about to have a monk's visit in a couple of, next week, and we'll see many pictures just of this. There's so much underlying grace that happens, and in India is such a common I can recite numerous examples of this. And so the doctor may have this is just another thing that he's experienced and he's heard. And as we don't know, he could have become a disciple, or he could already have a path of his own.
I would say, just on this topic, it is a little bit perplexing to me sometimes when I see people who may be kind of close to the SRF, really kind of go there and then don't actually go that extra mile to go to the lengths that we've gone to, for example. And I kind of scratch my head at it, think, I wonder why. But we've had so many lives, so many incarnations, that we're so uniquely disposed towards our own path, and that path is windy and turns, and it goes in different directions to the ones that we've taken. So what one might be convinced of being true, then that might set them on this path of their own journey to find exactly the best thing for them in that moment anyway. So yeah, I kind of wrestled with that idea a little bit before, where I'm like, surely everybody sees how great this guru is, and Paramahansa Yogananda, and so on and so forth. And, you read the book, and that's you hooked, right? Because that was me hooked. But yeah, we're all on our own path to God.
You mean, like, why on earth did they start a 5-year podcast project straight after going to the center and experiencing the grace?
Exactly.
Oh, you're muted, Lauren.
That's an amazing story, what you told us, Priyank. Wow. I think, it's just almost slightly incomprehensible to my little Western mind, because miracles like that, I don't think I know anybody who's told me of one like that, or it's not something that seems like it is very commonplace here in the West. Maybe it is, and I'm just not exposed to it. But
people don't share that much, I don't think. There must be a cultural thing that, like, it might happen, and you keep it close to your heart, lest it get kind of.
I guess in the West we have Christianity. That's the overbearing kind of force in religious practice, whereas this is, a lot different in Hinduism. With the specific gurus, and we would say, okay, well, in Ireland maybe it's folklore, and there's maybe instances that people would share that would give people faith in God, and that God would be the Christian God, and then they would just go to church. They wouldn't actually go seek out the guru. So we just have different ways, I suppose, of channeling that faith in the West versus this guru-disciple relationship.
Yeah, it's true, because you do hear more stories within the Christian faith of sort of miraculous healings. But not so much of one from a direct guru. But like you say, Priyank, when things like that happen, you tend to keep it.
You'd be bowing at Yukteswar's feet.
Yeah.
You would have thought, but yeah.
I guess we keep them close to our heart, don't we? We don't want to sort of share them too much. And
Maybe
yeah,
maybe he's realized himself.
yeah, maybe. We don't know. But Mukunda agrees with the doctor that he's, very fortunate to have a guru with divine healing powers. And then Mukunda's friends return. So just as the doctor's going to leave, Rajendra and Audi, is that how I pronounce it? Appeared at the door. And apparently they came in with a lot of resentment on their faces, which quickly changed to sympathy when they saw the doctor. And then, obviously Mukunda's there in bed. And it kind of made me think about how it's easy to get caught up in our feelings about things sometimes, and we can actually completely misunderstand, and we can feel negatively about certain situations or people, and actually we don't know the full picture. And obviously when they come in, it's like, oh dear, he's not been very well. That's why he's not come.
I feel like they're really loyal friends, because I can imagine here in the West, if your mate didn't turn up for the train, that's it, let's go without him. Let's go without. He's obviously a tardy person, especially considering like their experience with Mukunda, like where Mukunda would often just cancel plans or make new plans, and I can imagine him doing this kind of stuff often, like based on intuition. But they've obviously been very loyal, and come back and stop their plans.
Even though they were angry. They said that they were angry when he didn't turn up. So yeah, it's quite something, isn't it? If your friends are annoyed at you, but they come back anyway, just to see. And then they ask if he's been sick, and he says yes. And he said that he couldn't help laughing as his friends put the luggage in the same corner that it had occupied yesterday. And then he says, I paraphrased, there was a ship that sailed for Spain. Before it arrived, it was back again. And I've wondered if anyone had heard this saying or a similar one before, because it was new to me.
I thought I had, so I did ask ChatGPT, and apparently it's a very common riddle, or like a nursery rhyme paradox. I think I've heard a similar paradox, not this specific one, but it plays on like something being circular or illusory, to spark the curiosity of children. So there's like various variations of this apparently, in childhood literature. This is probably why it seems so familiar perhaps to us, but we wouldn't use it in our day-to-day language. But yeah, it is obviously paradoxical, but it sounds really nice somehow.
Yeah, it's so lovely. It's got like a little ring to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And then Sri Yukteswar comes in the room, and I think this is one of my favorite lines in this chapter. Guruji says, I permitted myself a convalescent's liberty and captured his hand lovingly. I just think it's so sweet. And he says, Guruji, from my 12th year on, I have made many unsuccessful attempts to reach the Himalayas. I'm finally convinced that without your blessings, the goddess Parvati will not receive me. So yeah, it reminded me of kind of, before we were discussing our main takeaways for the chapter in the first episode, and it was that thing for me of, if it's not the divine will, then it won't happen, and we need our guru's blessing if we want something, and how that is a very humbling sort of realization that it's completely in divine hands. But there is a footnote after the word goddess Parvati. Priyank, what's going to happen next week when we explore that footnote?
Bit of a colossal footnote, and we're going to use this end of after we stop recording. We're going to review how to tackle this, because there's many prongs. There's the whole very spiritually significant places like Himalayas and the king that's referenced here, and the lure of the kind of mountainscape in India, like Mukunda's love for the Himalayas. It's all kind of encapsulated in this footnote. And then there's the whole Kali Ma and all her different names of Parvati that's there. Shiva is there. So these are vast subjects. And then there's references to a poet, Kalidas, and a mystic, Lala Yogeshwari, which you could do a whole episode on them, just those characters or people in history, because they're so significant. And then we'll decide how much to go into that, because we could spend quite a long time. But Guruji's mentioned those people, so I feel like they're significant. And he always brings in things that we should possibly do our own research on. So maybe we should for this as well. And then we'll end on reflections of the chapter as a whole.
Great. Looking forward to delving in. I feel like often, Priyank, you get the very sort of intellectual, scholarly sections of the autobiography.
The previous time, a couple of times, I believe it was by chance, but this one I actually didn't notice, but I switched it around. I thought it was a bit unfair to whoever got this, because I've got quite a lot of experience in most of these matters, whereas I'm sure the three of you would have had to do a lot of research, more so than me, to speak about these illustrious topics.
Speak for us all and say we appreciate it. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought I was actually going to ask you last time, but you actually Lauren, you just started doing the episode, like preparing. I was like, okay, I don't need to ask. She's already started doing it. But I actually swapped us around. But hopefully you don't mind.
No, and I think it's so sweet that you just did it so quietly. Like you just you didn't say anything, and you thought of us, and that's really nice. Thank you, Priyank. Oh, so divine. That's very sort of God and Guru like. They worked very quietly for us, and so did you. So thank you. And thank you all for this episode. And I'm looking forward to next week. We'll see you.
Staggered.